Welcome back to the Aussie Shed, ladies and gentlemen, where the mini lathe madness continues. It's currently raining cats and dogs outside. If you hear any strange noise on the audio, that's what it is. For those outside of Australia that may not know this could be a little bit of a concern for me at the moment. If it continues to rain, the crocs could come up close to the shed and I may not be able to get out of here tonight unless I'm going to fight my way through them. But anyway, back onto the mini lathe. Repairs have been done, discoveries have been made. And without further ado, let's strip this back down and I'll go into detail about exactly what's gone on since the last video. All broken down. Now, as most of you with a trained eye can see, from the surface on all of these bits, they've all been scraped. There's been lots of scraping going on. So what have we scraped? First of all, I've scraped the top of the compound where your tool holder sits. I've also scraped the underside of the compound. I haven't scraped in the dovetails. I don't have a tool that would get me in there, and realistically I don't think I have the skills to do it. I haven't scraped inside any of the dovetails as much as I would have liked to do it. I'm honestly just a novice at this kind of stuff. This is the first time I've scraped anything in my life. What enabled me to get there with this was I was armed with a couple of videos by Stefan Gottswinter, a homemade scraper from a file that I just knocked up the other night, my granite surface plate which is over there, and a lot of guts and determination. So we've also scraped the compound mount. You can see it's fully scraped entirely on the bottom. The flat surface of the dovetail has been scraped. The cross slide, the entire surface of the top of the cross slide has been scraped. Initially I only intended to scrape the section where the compound mounted, but after sitting it on the surface plate there was a big lump on this end and it was making it really hard to get an accurate reading on it. At first I was sitting it half on the surface plate and it was just giving me the shit, so I ended up scraping the whole thing. I've also scraped the underside. I've scraped the top surface of the saddle here where the slide mounts on. I've scraped the underside of the saddle where it hits the ways. I've also scraped the plates that I made up for the underside of the saddle. I've scraped the bottom of those. And I think that just about sums it up. I'll just give you a squiz at my rinky-dink scraping setup. Now this is the official Aussie Shed guide to cobbling crap together to get shit done when you don't have the right tools and you don't feel like spending the money to do it because it's something that you're probably never really going to do very often. Anyhow, I don't know how many of you people are aware, but I am not an engineer in any way, shape or form, or a machinist or anything like that. The Aussie Shed is set up as a backyard mechanical workshop. So as far as machinist equipment, I'm kind of lacking in that department. So with a lot of things, I just get by with what I have, which in a lot of cases is just good old-fashioned hard work and not being afraid to have a crack at stuff just to get the job done. So, back onto the scraper. This is my scraper. It's just an old file. Now I have quite a few files. I dragged this one out and thought, yeah, I can sacrifice it to the scraping gods. I watched a Stefan Gottswinter video where he detailed the correct angles for the radius and the undercut on the front here of 5 degrees, which I've made them. And I don't know if you can see, she's looking a bit daggy now, but there's 2 edges on there, one on the top, one on the bottom. It's in dire need of a regrind. But I roughed the thing out just with a handheld 4-inch grinder with a grinding disc on it, and used the grinding disc to take off the fileness of the file to get it down on a flat surface or thereabouts, and then finished it off. The final flattening I just finished off on the 6x9 belt disc sander that you've seen me rebuild. It's running a very fine belt on it at the moment, so it's ideal for dressing things like this. I used it to give me the radius on the front and just roughly cut the angle on here. So what I've been using to sharpen this is this tool over here, It's a saw blade sharpener and it has a diamond wheel on it, and I use it to sharpen all my tungsten carbide power saw blades with, which I have quite a lot of. The wheel that's on there isn't the standard wheel that comes with the machine. The standard wheel that came on it, like most of this crap out of China, was a piece of junk. It was too coarse and made quite a mess of the teeth. So it's quite a fine diamond impregnated resin, I think, that's on there. And I've just been using that to sharpen this with. So all I've done, I just dragged out an old Penfolds wine box, used to get me up to roughly the right height, so I'm roughly in the middle of the blade. Cut a block of wood at 5 degrees on a miter saw, and then I've just been sitting the file flat on the block at the correct angle. Start her up and just move it across the blade. Very gently, spin it over, do the other side. Just nice and careful hand movement. And it actually comes up really, really sharp. So that's how I put my scraper together. Biggest drawback of a piece of shit scraper like this is it goes blunt quite fast. Even though it's very hard steel. It's obviously nothing like a piece of tungsten. And yeah, you've got to constantly sharpen it. For example, this piece here, one pass over this would easily use up both sides of the file, and I'd have to touch it up again on the saw blade sharpener, which only takes 2 seconds to do, mind you. I had it left set up there permanently. It was just a matter of flicking it on, run it across the top, and it should be good to go again. Yeah, but it was a constant pain. Obviously a proper scraper with a tungsten carbide blade in the end of it would be fantastic, but I didn't have one, wasn't in a position to get one. Who knows whether I'll even do any more scraping again. At this point, I thought, yep, this is what I'll do. Anyway, I've done it. I've managed to scrape pretty much everything that I wanted to scrape. It's all turned out really good. For all you pro scrapers out there, it probably looks like a bit of a shit job, but it all comes up good when it's on the surface plate. I've just been using a roller and bearing blue. One thing I did find quite tricky was rolling out the bluing compound to get the right thickness so you don't have too much or too little, and you know, there's lots of technique in doing this. So all you guys out there who are gun scrapers, I feel your pain. It's certainly a very skilled job. Anyhow, back to the mini lathe. Now, getting so touchy-feely with these parts that you can't help but by doing with the scraping process, I came across a few issues. Now, it seems to be quite commonplace when I look at every individual component on this mini lathe. Each component seems to have at least one flaw in it. Now, I've got a bit of a theory on this, and my theory is that the people who manufacture these mini lathes, from my understanding, there is a big factory in China that churns them out. They churn them out for everyone. All the brand name mini lathes like the Siegs and other companies who are prepared to put a name onto these things don't seem to have the amount of quality control issues that this particular lathe has. Now, this lathe is one of the absolute budget cheapest that you can buy, no name brand on it, off eBay, straight from China jobs. Now, what I feel is these lathes are made up out of all of the reject and out of spec pieces that have been rejected when they have been assembling mini lathes for their brand name resellers. And the reason I think that is just because of the way these things kind of work. Like, you can imagine when they're putting together a machine for one of their bigger brand name sellers, they've got components that aren't quite in spec. So rather than throw them out, they just toss them all aside, and then after a certain amount of time, they probably assemble all of those components into other mini lathes, such as this one, with no brand on them, and sell them cheap on eBay or wherever. That's just how it kind of seems to me. Anyway, let's just get back to some of the things that I've come across with the latest venture into these components. Now, the base here for the compound, I'll pick this up and show you on the camera, and I'm sure you can see it. The dovetail on one side is, you know, it's alright. But the dovetail on this side, up this end here, she's missing, mate. The casting didn't make it to the edge of the dovetail, or it was positioned badly when it was machined. But the dovetail on this side, you can see on the end there, it's absolutely crap. So I would consider that to be a reject part. There's no way that their brand name resellers would be happy with coming across a component like that in one of their lathes. So yeah, that's been hoyed to the side, I reckon, and used to assemble one of these pieces of crap. So that's the flaw in that component. And also on the front of this compound base mount is where this piece of crap plastic bloody angle gauge sits for rotating the compound, which is just a complete waste of time. And it sits really crooked. The holes look like they've been drilled freehand, and I'm sure you can tell by looking at that. They're not on the same line. You can see this guy over here is low, this one's more to the center, and they're actually too wide apart in relation to this plastic piece of crap. It just sits like a pair of balls on a park bench. Absolutely useless. So that's probably just going to end up in the bin, and we'll I don't know, do something else here. Anyway, another flaw with that one. We've been through the gib strips. You saw how crap they were. They're pretty tidy now though, even though they look absolutely hideous. From a functional point of view, they're beautiful and flat, nice and smooth, and they seem to perform perfectly. I'll just insert a bit of video here of the final finishing of the gib strip for the compound. I'm currently just working on the gib strip for the compound. You can see where the original holes were. That's these big oversized fellas. One there, one there, and one there. And with their relevant holes, you can see where it actually locates the gib strip. It's hanging out on this end, short on that end, and it's impossible to line all three holes up together at once. You can see if we correctly line this one up, this one here is too far this way, and so is this one. We line this guy up on this end, we get those two right, and this one doesn't line up. So what I decided to do was just basically to completely ignore these oversized drilled recesses in the gib strip and just make new locating holes myself. I've managed to center the gib strip correctly in the compound and just drill some locating holes with a 4mm end mill, and plus put extra holes for gib strip adjustment in. As you remember, there was only 3, now there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It gives me a position for a locking screw and more adjustment. So now all the holes line up correctly, all the indents I mean line up correctly, and it all turned out quite good. The gib strip itself, I spent quite a bit of time in tapping it around to get it as straight as I possibly can after I drill these indents in it, because obviously you want to get any processes like that out of the way, because it can possibly change the shape of the finished piece. So now that that's all out of the way and I've straightened it as best as I possibly can, I'm now in the process of hand lapping it to its final shape. You can see here the Sharpie mark on the underside here. I'll just bring it up to the camera. I've just given that a quick rub over the diamond plate there, and you can see we've taken the Sharpie straight off on both ends, which would indicate that there's a substantial hollow in the center of it. I've done more work on the backside here. It's probably 3/4 of the way there now, but it started off, it was all kind of wild. There was, you know, a big Sharpie mark here. It was basically touching on the ends and had 2 half moons on opposite sides running through the center here. It's mostly sorted out now. Where these 2 holes, have broken out through the top of the gib strip here, I've just cleaned them up with a hand file and deburred all the edges of the gib strip. Fortunately, they won't be too big of a problem because they'll be in the upper half of the compound, and when the gib strips are forced in, they actually pull away from the top and away from this side and push into the gib. As horrible as this side looks, it won't pose any physical problem. The biggest issue at the moment is getting those 2 sides flat, which is the back and the bottom. So this is the same process that I went through with the gib strip in the cross slide. It started off roughly the same, very bent alignment holes, not spot on. The alignment holes were actually better than these, but it was slightly worse bent. And I went through the same process, hand lapping it, getting it nice and straight. I'm also, as I lap these and get it to the finish point, I'm also touching it off on the surface plate just to make sure that they are finishing up dead straight. And they're pretty horrendous from the factory, as you can tell. Well, you saw the original one with a massive woof in it. It would have created a hell of a lot of binding issues in both the slides. But hopefully we'll have all that sorted out soon and she'll be working sweet. So I'll just carry on lapping this. All I'm doing is just spraying a bit of WD-40 down onto the diamond plate, sitting it on in whatever position needs to be, holding it with my little fingies as best as I can so it doesn't rock over, and just lapping away just until we eventually get rid of all the Sharpie mark that's left on there. I'll finish hand lapping these and then go and touch them off on the surface plate and put them back in. I won't bore you with footage of me hand lapping these. It's a pretty obvious task. It's just repetitively backwards and forwards, just lapping away until they're done. I think that's looking pretty good now. I might just mark it up. A bit of magic marker. Just check the narrow side. Pretty nice and black there. We'll just give him a quick rub. I won't use any WD-40 because it'll probably just take it off. But as you can see, no remnants on the edge. Nice and black. And no remnants on the face. We are looking pretty damn good now. Very nice indeed. A big improvement. We've been over the issues with the height mounting of the cross slide lead screw nut. That was all covered in the last episode. Okay, now here we have the piece that mounts the compound base onto the cross slide. And what you see here is there are 4 holes, 4 threaded holes. 2 are the originals and 2 of them are mine. And the reason I have re-drilled and re-tapped this is, in the process of mounting the compound to the top of the cross slide, I noticed that the bolts that go down through here were very, very hard to get in. So I disassembled it and had a bit of a look at it, and what I found was, of course, there was a misalignment with the holes. If you lined one hole up, the other one was dragging really hard on the edge of the hole, and you know what happens when in that scenario, you get one in, you screw the other bolt in, it just strips all the thread off the side of the bolt. And they were just on wicked angles, so I sort of half-assedly put it together and tried to tighten it up, and it wouldn't actually tighten down enough to stop the compound swiveling on here. Like, you know, it was obviously firm, but you could just turn it. It was really shit, and it was because the angle that the screws were going in was actually stopping the compound being pulled hard down. So, easy fix. Just bloody re-drill it and re-tap it. So I just, you know, sat it down on the bench, ran a transfer punch through both of them, remarked it, re-drilled it, re-tapped it, and now it's sweet. The screws go in really easy and it clamps down really, really well. You can clamp the thing rock hard with just one screw and it's not a problem. Because it's all been scraped now, there's really good contact between the 2 surfaces, which it was pretty shit on the top of the cross slide there. It was a bit lumpy bumpy, but yeah, so that's another fix of another piece of crap. Alright, now over here to the lead screw for the cross slide. I pointed out in the last video that there was slop between the forward and backward movement of the lead screw, which would have ended up presenting itself as backlash. Now, I was looking for something to put in there, and lo and behold, I found a fibre washer in my fibre washer kit that had the exact OD, ID and correct thickness to go into there and space that correctly. So now when this is done up tightly in the cross slide, that's beautiful. No more end play, and it's very nice. And I probably won't do this as a permanent fix. I imagine this fibre washer will probably wear out reasonably quickly, but in order to fix it properly, I need a working lathe, and currently that's all I have. So yeah, there's quite a few things that I've sort of thought about and thought, well, once I get the lathe back together, I may make further modifications to different components just to do a little bit more of a better job, because it's quite limited what you can do, you know, with just what you've got at hand. Anyway, that fixes that problem, and it's a good fix. It all works fantastically. Yeah, I don't think it's something that's going to last forever, but I could always just throw another fibre washer in. I've got a bloody big drawer of them. Anyhow, so that's another problem solved. So I'll just assemble the compound, and I'll have a bit of a chat to you about a little bit of an issue that I've discovered and a piece that I've made that seems to fix the problem really well. I'll put it together and I'll give you a look. So what I've been fiddling around with on the compound, to me, seems to be a bit of a design flaw. It works roughly on the same principle as the cross slide, wherein the raised section on the lead screw bears against the body of the saddle when it's turned in, and then on the way out it bears against this block that holds it in position, which is where we threw the fibre washer under there. So that then traps this raised section and gets rid of any end float in the shaft and holds it in position, and it's all hunky-dory. But if we have a look at the compound, this is the piece that goes on in this position, and you can see when you unwind the compound, it bears against the back of this this block here, which is bolted through into the top of the compound, so it takes the compound with it. But if you turn the compound screw the other way, there's nothing actually stopping the raised section on the lead screw from going in. Now, what keeps that captive is when this next piece is put on over here, it locks on with a grub screw on here, and there's also like two nuts in kind of a nut and lock nut configuration that goes up against this. And the situation that this causes is when you wind the lead screw out, everything functions correctly, but then when you wind the lead screw in, it's very hard to stop this outside disc that has all the markings on it from stopping when it should be turning against this piece here. The reason is there's a lot of friction generated because it basically gets pulled hard forward until these two are brought hard together, and there's a lot of friction generated between the two of these when you turn the lead screw in, I think it is. And the backlash of the lead screw is set by how tight this mounts against here, and then these two lock nuts on the back here. So there's really no way around it. When you wind it in, I think it is, this marking disc stays stationary, but then when you wind it out, it moves. And it's very, very hard to stop it moving. Even when you do this grub screw up really, really tight, it still all just wants to kind of move, and it really wants to bind up as well, because these things don't really run that nicely together. It's just a really shit design. So I thought, how can I correct this and take all the pressure off this this section in here and not cause any problems with the operation of the cross slide? So I've come up with a bit of an idea, and I'll just show you what I've done now. So what I've done is I've made up this plate here. I'll just take the lead screw back out and I'll mount this plate on, and I'll show you how it works. Okay, so this plate just mounts onto the end of the compound. All I've done is I've drilled and tapped an M4 hole in each corner, and the holes in the center here, they're the holes that they're just a through hole for the bolts that mount this plate onto, then run through and clamp that piece onto this piece here. And what this actually does is it creates exactly the same scenario that we have in the cross slide, where the raised section on the lead screw is clamped in both directions. As you can see there, if it can no longer slide freely in, and it's held on the way out by this same piece. All that I have left to do here is I have to bore a recess into the back of this component, the same thickness as the raised section on the lead screw, and that will be my backlash adjustment. I will probably leave it slightly shallow and maybe put a piece of shim stock behind this as I mount it in, so I have something that I can remove if it starts to wear. It seemed to me to be a pretty good idea. It doesn't affect the free movement of the compound at all. Because the threaded section for the compound is in this end here compared to the opposite end for the cross slide, there's plenty of thread to wind the thing back out on. Like, this is only a 5mm plate, so you're only losing 5mm of the total length of the lead screw, and it's not enough to affect it. Like, it's still going to give you full travel. You're still going to run out of gib engagement on the base before you run out of thread on the cross slide, and it will still wind in all of the way that it did originally up to that point where it's flat, and it should give you zero backlash. And plus, like I say, if I bore the hole a bit shallow, mount it with a bit of shim stock, I then have something that I can use to play with to adjust backlash on the compound at any time should it wear. So that's my idea. Let me know what you think about it. I've just ordered some new hardware for this, some longer bolts to go in here once that's been done to make up for the thickness of the plate. I've actually ordered quite a lot of new hardware. All of these socket head screws in here are going to be replaced with grub screws. Just about every nut and bolt on this thing I've ended up replacing because they're either damaged or they're too short or whatever, you know. That's going pretty well. I might just bore this piece out, make up a bit of a shim stock spacer for it, and put the whole thing back together and give you another look at it. Alright, looks like the rain's eased up. I think I might take me chances and get out of here. See if I can make it back to the house. Here I go. Wish me luck. Get out of it, you bastards! Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's now the next day. I made it safely into the house last night and had a ripper of a sleep. I thought I'd come back out here and just finish off this video. So this little piece here that I was talking about on the last video that I made up, very successful. I didn't end up drilling out the back of this disc here. I measured the size of the ring on the lead screw and it was 14mm, and I don't have a 14mm end mill. I have a 14mm drill, of course, which I could grind flat, but I've decided that I'm just going to leave it for the time being, because once the lathe is finished, it'll be a piece of piss to just chuck it up and do it at that point. So at this stage, I've just put a couple of spacers in behind it, which gives me the correct operation on the compound now, and it's really, really good. I highly recommend this modification here, guys. So at this stage, all this stuff here, I'm pretty happy with. Everything's working really, really well. The saddle moves beautifully. There is no movement in it. It moves so smoothly, but yet it is so tight on the lathe bed. The cross slide is just smooth and beautiful to use. Once again, no free play, no backlash, just really, really nice. And the compound, Same thing, ladies and gentlemen. Just moves really, really nicely. My finger's getting jammed under there. It just moves really, really nicely. No movement in the whole assembly. Tailstock very happy. Great lead screw engagement. Everything has shaped up really, really well. So, where do we go from here? Well, I'm glad you asked. I think it's time that we got a bit of head stock action going on. This is the next project, the mighty headstock. So in the next video, I think we might make a few measurements, check this for run out, see how it came from the factory, tear it down, fit some new angular contact bearings to it, paint the casing, put it back together, have another look at it. But for now, I think we'll just leave it there. I'd like to just give a quick shout out to Richard from Canada for putting some beer money in the PayPal tip jar last week. Thanks, mate. If any of you kind folk out there would also like to help support the Aussie Shed, you can donate via PayPal and Patreon. Links in the description. Even a couple of bucks helps keep us in beer and shells. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.